Bones and All is not your regular coming-of-age road movie. It's bitter, yet sweet. It's nostalgic, yet brutal. It warms your heart just to throw stone-cold, harsh truth at your face the next minute. It's a ride worth taking, but as you get closer to the bone, you find it won't be an easy one to digest. Puns intended. We open on a variety of landscapes, a series of paintings, all proudly exposed on the hall of a school. They're impressionistic, colorful, and yet dry and uncannily bleak. They scream solitude. And thus, from frame number 1, the main theme of the film is established. Maren is a teenager who we soon find out suffers from an insatiable hunger, a desperate craving for human flesh, an instinct that she indulges one time too many, dooming her to solitude within the first 10 minutes of the film. Her father abandons her, condemning his daughter to finding a place in the world on her own. Now an outcast, Maren soon meets the character that will arguably have the most decisive impact on her arc. Sullivan. Sully for friends. Except you will learn he doesn't have any. The old man definitely comes across as a mysterious creep, but his demeanor suggests otherwise. He's generous and sympathetic to Maren, which seduces her to follow him to his, let's call it temporary hideout. Here, Maren will be confronted with a thorny moral dilemma. Upstairs is the house owner in agony, and her life will end soon. The girl is overwhelmed by the dreadful feeling of being a monster, and when she expresses how wrong she thinks feeding on the old lady would be, Sully explains that's just the law of their jungle. Know when to take an opportunity or live with regret when you succumb to your craving in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sully acts as her father figure, walking his lost child through the ABC of survival. He lives by a strict set of rules. The first one being,
never, ever ate an aider.
Secondly, and perhaps most importantly, he doesn't kill people. He's not an animal, nor a monster. Or is he? Behind the old man's odd mannerism hides a devastating history of dread and solitude. But you see, he didn't allow that to eat away at him. Instead, he opens up to the young lady, and even shares the story of his first hunger for human flesh with Maren, hoping it would help her better understand her own self. Noting her visible discomfort, Sully shows her the way he uses to cope with his cannibalism. That braid, albeit an arguably morbid sight, actually portrays Sully's humanity. It's not a ghoulish collection of trophies. In fact, it is a way to pay respect to those he ended up feeding from. In that regard, he's presumably a more gracious man than most of us. We breed livestock ruthlessly, forcing animals to live under shockingly barbaric physical and psychological conditions. What we buy at the supermarket often goes to waste, and what doesn't get bought, well, I'm getting too political, but you get the point. Sully believes in a moral code and lives by it, but that's not enough to Maren. Matter of fact, if you watch this beautifully crafted sequence, you yourself will notice there is just something you can quite point your finger at. Something that is off about him. So she leaves, after spending more screen time with him than she did with her own father. Moments later, as soon as we see Chalamet's face, Sully just becomes a shadow of the past. It is very clear a love story is about to blossom. Nonetheless, we expect Maren to be as wary and cautious as she was towards her previous acquaintance. And though Lee definitely comes across as an impulsive, unpredictable, and perhaps trouble kid, she just kind of accepts that. Marion jumps on a pickup with this blood-soaked, total stranger, and actually appears to be relieved. Funnily enough, we as an audience shared a feeling too. Perhaps knowing the writer wouldn't allow Chalamet's character to hurt our heroine. Or, on a more serious note, we can almost smell that Lee simply lacks the discomforting eccentricity of Sully. We will soon find out that's what she was running from in the first place, and we'll talk about why in a minute. Strengthening their bond of unspoken, awkward teenage love for the next 10 minutes or so, Marion is finally reminded that she is no regular person, and with no hope for a regular life. When the unofficial couple meets Jake and Brad at the campfire, Marion and Lee learn they're eaters just like them. Or actually, not quite like them. Brad is a police officer, and he doesn't suffer from the same uncontrollable cravings that Marion or Lee do. His was a different type of hunger. He ate 3 people because he wanted to. He was hungry for power. A police officer. Ironic, isn't it? Marion is clearly disturbed by that information and leaves the same night along with Lee. She understands that's a potential version of her future self, and she wants none of that. Nor does Lee. Back on the road, Marion realizes she needs to face her condition sooner or later. But thankfully, she's got Lee to take care of that, and he sets up a nice date with a dinner for 2. Sharing her burden with Lee, Marion finds the validation she much needed, until a heinous realization. They both hate a family man. Lee was clearly unaware of the one key detail that would change everything. Yet, Marion still breaks down, suddenly succumbing to her renewed feeling of being a monster. How dare you make this harder? What Marion wasn't ready for, however, was meeting her biological mother. Being told she willingly locked herself up, the girl quickly understands the reason why. She's an eater too. Hoping to understand why her mom decided to leave her and her father behind, she reads a letter where the woman explains her only intention was to protect them from her insatiable hunger. She wanted love, but with her own words, the word of love wants no monsters in it. And she attempts to eat her in order to spare her daughter from a life of misery and suffering, or so she believes. On the road yet again, Marion understands that she cannot escape her dreadful fate. She's either to become a bloodthirsty hound like Brad, a helpless weirdo like Sully, a deranged woman tormented by her addiction like her mother, or an unsympathetic teenager who shrugs off involuntary manslaughter of innocent people. None of these are appealing options, obviously, so she decides that if she's to take any of those roads, she'd rather walk them by herself. Except, she can't. Sully for Friends is back for his only friend. Just like in the first act of the story, he always refers to himself in the third person, and when he admits to following her all along, she finally sees it. The single common denominator of all the people she ran from: loneliness. Brad wanted power in order to get validation. Her mother wanted to spare her from losing the people she loved the most. Lee wanted to share the burden of a difficult life with a loved one. So Lee just needed a friend, because the only one he'd had for his whole life was himself. That's why he refers to himself in the third person. He so desperately needs someone, anyone, that he'd rather have an imaginary copy of himself than the bleak landscape of a dry America that plays death in the face of the unheard and marginalized. If you've made it through your 20s, I wouldn't believe you if you told me you never felt like a freak, that at least once in your life you haven't felt wrong. Lost and without knowing his place in the world, Sully's desperate need for contact is a cry for help. Marion knows that, but the reason why she rejects his offer to come along is because she refuses to accept her own identity. and she hopes to prove him wrong too, by getting him to refer to himself in the first person.
You don't like Sully.
That breaks him.
Why do you say your name like you're two different people?
You don't like me.
And though she doesn't show it, it breaks her in return. She realizes she needs to go back to Lee and amend her mistakes. Marion might accept her condition one day, but she couldn't take becoming as pathetically lonely as Sully. It would be too much for anyone. After trying to be people for a while, Marion is about to face the cost of avoiding the truth of her condition and of leaving behind unfinished business. Having had his reality forever shattered, the old man lets go of his moral code, of his civil behavior, and most regrettably, of his humanity. He literally drools over her, starving, though not for human flesh, but rather for a genuine connection. Now that there's no more Sullivan, there's only Sully for friends. And if he can have a friend, he'll take their life all for himself in order to have someone. And if not to his side, then within his belly will do just fine. It sounds revolting and reprehensible, I know, but do remember that we as humans are social animals. If this scene seems too far-fetched, remember that our fear of loneliness brought some of us to kill or to suicide because of it. Whether it is hunger for validation, a thirst for power, a genuine need for love, or, we are all starving for social connection. Whether we like it or not, it is an inherent part of our human nature. We will always be craving for more, whether we do get more or not. I did warn you that as we get closer to the bone, we'd find out it was not going to be an easy one to digest. And because of that, in a vain attempt at perhaps comforting ourselves a bit, we might as well eat all of it, bones and all. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. This film is incredible, and though not an easy watch, I promise there's plenty of wholesome and tender moments. Please do consider liking and subscribing, or even sharing. It would really mean a lot to us. In the meantime, look out for more character-based video essays on this channel.